We're going to be hearing from 3 talented speakers on the topic of the A to Z of typography. We're incredibly lucky to have these 3 amazing creatives who collectively probably know literally the A to Zs of everything type. So we'll begin tonight hearing from Bobby, then followed by Amy and Carla, the ladies of letters, presenting as a duo. Bob works with Illustrator and letters a lot. He talks, he walks, he eats rice. Primarily, he's a freelance graphic designer with a love of type and illustration. An accidental chef for many years who hung his knives and apron to focus on his creative career. He spent a few years in the branding, media and advertising industry, and now commonly found hustling type, connecting people and making things happen. Please join me in welcoming our first speaker, Bobby.
Hello. Good evening. Hello, everyone. So my name is Bobby Haiqalsyah. Oh, you just call me Bobster. If I'm in trouble, people at work call me Bobster 14. So I'll just go with it. Yeah, I am an illustrator and designer. You can find me everywhere as that. These sort of talks, I like to go with like a who, what, where origin story. Let's go back to the beginning. So I was born in Indonesia, precisely in Jakarta. If anyone know anything about Indonesia, it's predominantly Muslim country, so you learn the Latin alphabet. You also learn a bit of Arabic alphabet if you come from a Muslim family. And it's also a triple-layered country where you have the national law, you have religious law, and you have cultural law. So if the government say everyone should wear a helmet, but if you go into the mosque and you've got the headdress, whatever. If you're going to the temple and you're wearing the special headgear, no one's going to stop you. So that's the sort of culture that I sort of grew up in. And the artwork that comes from there is very sort of colorful, very ornamental, very vibrant, just like the sort of the nature that surrounds it. And also, I was also surrounded by a lot of Islamic art, which has 3 sort of main foundation, which are the scriptures, the Word of God, and also a lot of geometry, because you're not allowed to portray impermanent things like someone's beauty or a vista and things like, because those things don't last. Yeah, geometry, calligraphy, and the scriptures. Those are the 3 foundations. Put them into one, it looks sort of like that. So not a lot of, this beautiful person or this beautiful tree. There's just a lot of patterns. So it's kind of like a lot of mathematical equations in how to produce these things. But when I was growing up, I loved a lot of comic books. So that's how I got into sort of the graphic arts. A lot of people that I liked studied design, so I thought, I want to be a comic artist. And a lot of them studied design, and I thought, yeah, I'll do that. But I came across this book called Understanding Comics that talked about depiction and the strength of how cartoons are more powerful than, let's say, something that's more realistic. The reason being, if the 2 dots and the line, you can project yourself into that. You don't have to be male, you don't have to be female, you don't have to be Asian or European. You can project yourself into that. That's why cartoons are quite powerful. But he said there's a sort of an X factor, which is words, where if I say bird, my picture of a bird and your picture of a bird is totally different things. So that's sort of something that I took with me. So if you make a graph, it looks something like that. Anyways, this was back in high school. And then I studied design. I also taught a bit of martial arts and culture in different parts of Australia. I was also a chef. That's in third year at uni, part-time. Many kilograms ago. And yeah, my last position was I was the head chef of a restaurant in St Kilda. And I did that 2.5 years after uni, so I was doing that. So I had to make a decision whether I should just keep cooking or do and focus back on my design career. I thought, all right, let's just go back on the path that I started on. And it was the global financial crisis. I couldn't get a job in Melbourne, so I went back to Jakarta where I was born. My dad was still there. We thought we'll be fine. We just sort of like everything looked rosy from here and emails, and but reality looks like this, and it looked like that. So, anyways, during my time there, I worked with a big media company. I did everything for their branding. They had like an airline. They did everything. I was sort of the SAS of design. So if they have like, all right, we'll buy an insurance company and then we'll do all the designs for them. Or we'll branch out to real estate and we'll do the design for them until they have their own design department. So that's what I did at the time. On my free time, played a lot with Illustrator just to get better at it. And anytime I get the chance, I try to do sort of free projects like, okay, it's Christmas coming up, let me do a special thing that we can sort of email to everyone. That's for me to sort of practice and also get better. And yeah. So a lot of this is partly, off-hour stuff and partly experimentation and stuff. So I also did this epic project. Took about 3 months to do, but it taught me how to work with Illustrator. I know 3 or 4 different ways of how to do one thing with this. I was in a long distance relationship at the time, so I had a lot of time to myself. But it didn't work out, so I was in depressed state, and I thought I'll just have an identity crisis. So what do I know about me? Because if you've been with someone for so long, you kind of build yourself around this person. When they're gone, you're like, what do I do now and who am I? So what's been me all this time has been my name. So I did a piece based on my name, and I put it up online on my Facebook and all that sort of jazz. I did one for a cousin of mine who was going through a breakup as well, so we were in the same boat. And people saw that and they started, okay, why don't you do mine? So that's sort of how I learn. It's just by keep making these sort of stuff. And then it got a bit stale. So I branched out to different styles. A friend have a band, say, can I make a piece for you? Or you feel shitty at the time. And you just sort of express it that way, whatever it may be. Yeah, and that led to, stuff, work actually commissioning me to do pieces for them. Friends of mine who started a new label. I said, all right, I'll do some pieces for you if you want, just to make sure that I can keep making stuff. And I just put it out there. And you don't know what people would like, because I thought like this stuff would really, get people's attention, but I guess not. Then the type stuff is the one that people really got into, so I just went with it. So I never started, say I'm going to be a letterer or work with letters all my life, but it just sort of worked out that way. Yeah, I was featured by Australia in Front. That's a bit of background of how I work. I draw stuff out and then I vectorize it because I'm a bit OCD. I put it out in different competitions, different sort of initiatives online, just to see whether how I can compete. If you're in the finals, that's great. That means you're up there. You know, that's sort of like a barometer whether like the stuff that you do is good enough or not. Again, competition, Australian in front. Play with dead words that are out of our vocabulary, and sort of illustrate it. More practice time. And again, more. And this sort of vintage stuff has been the stuff that's been my main source of inspiration. I guess because it resonates with me from my background, where a lot of the art is quite vibrant and colorful and, you know, decorative, and I can relate to it much better than the minimalist stuff. And so with that, I got accepted to the Jacket Winter group, and then I've been working with them ever since. First clients were Harley Davidson, because they saw the vintage stuff and they went, we like that stuff. No way. Okay. Yeah. So things like that. AMP. These are the first two clients. That's done by hand. So 1 to 0, percentage, dot, decimal point, everything. But yeah, this is mostly my stuff. A lot of flourishes. And a lot of the stuff that I do now have come from the stuff that I've done for fun. So I did this thing for Threadless. They had a vintage theme. I'm like, oh, that is so me. And I just did this piece based on a Billy Joel lyric song. And I had to do another piece based on that. That's for Computer Arts Magazine. I had to make a tutorial for it. This was for a charity event for single mothers. So all the pieces are for sale. We didn't get paid for them, but I can sort of let my hair down. But that led to this campaign for Water Corp in WA. It's based on the different plants in Australia. That was for a font that a friend made, and this is for a spread in a magazine based on that piece. And that's, you don't know which of your pieces would sort of catch people's attention, and you just go with it. This is more sort of client work, Monster Children magazine. That's the Melbourne piece that I was talking to Amy about. Yeah, because I love Melbourne. Anyways, so yeah, there's more client work, City of Melbourne, Links and Red Cross. I work better with questions, so just think them up. I like connect you. And yeah. So based on the Melbourne stuff, Harley Davidson wanted to do something similar, so I did something for them. That's for Energy Australia for their Valentine's Day sort of promotion, which happens to be my birthday. So presents this way, please. And yeah, that's all I have to show, really. So if you have any questions, I'll see you in 20 minutes or so. Thank you very much.
Isn't he adorable? Okay, on to Amy and to Carla. These are my best bios ever, so I'm going to enjoy reading these. Amy, in 2008, Amy rescued her first printing press from a chicken shed in Maui and lovingly restored it back to working order. 7 years and 4 presses later, Amy has a studio full of printing beasts and a vast letterpress offering, including modern letterpress instruction at her monthly beginners letterpress class and an open access letterpress studio. Carla, operating out of a beautiful shared creative space in Melbourne, Little Gold Studios. Carla handcrafts lettering for a range of clients in creative industries, including fashion, music, food, branding, retail, hospitality, magazines, books, weddings, everything, all right? After studying graphic design at university and 6 years working, Carla escaped to Berlin to soak up some international inspiration and nurture her love of lettering and artisan design. On returning from what she affectionately calls her Bowie years in Germany, Carla set up her studio with the aim of bringing a warm, unique human element to a world dominated by digital fonts and design. So please join me in welcoming Carla and Amy.
Oh, hi.
Oh, hi.
Yeah, it's on.
It is on. I'm Amy.
And I'm Carla, obviously.
We're not going to talk in unison or anything. We thought we might, yeah. We met on a picnic blanket at the Big Hearted Business Conference about 2 years ago.
Yes. And it wasn't until later that Amy realised that I was this girl that creeped her out via email. When I first moved to Melbourne, I sent Amy a cold email saying, "Hey, I really like Letterpress. Maybe I could work with you or something." And she eventually wrote back, 2 months later. But anyway, then we met on the picnic blanket, and 2 months later she moved into the studio space where I work, Little Gold.
It was a whirlwind romance.
It was.
Yeah. And now we work out of Little Gold Studios, which is a big, well, it's actually not that big, it's a shared studio space in Brunswick with about 10 different businesses that range from, we've got a lamp maker, we've got a letterpress printer, letterer, stationer, some digital design peeps, there's a PR department, it feels like sometimes, and some graphic designers, and it's the best place to work in.
It's awesome.
Yeah, it's
We're
really
just
good.
so happy that we get to go there every day.
Yeah, every day.
And when Amy moved in, she set up her presses across from where I sit, and it was only natural that I started to say, "Hey, could you print some of my stuff? That'd be pretty awesome." And then we decided to do a project together, and Amy was like,
I letterpress the shit out of that, is what I think I
actually
said.
that,
Yeah.
So I drew a whole alphabet, illustrated them, and Amy's like, "Let's print those in 2 colours each." So that's
56 colours in the end, I think we printed.
It was a pretty epic project, and we decided to make a little film about it.
Yeah.
And yes.
How do we do this? How do we do this now?
Oh,
Hang on.
that's Little Gold.
That's Little Gold. That's me as well, heavily pregnant, mind you.
So that's Gordon.
That's Gordon, one of my printing presses. Okay.
So we call ourselves the Ladies of Letters, and it's sort of become something that's bigger than ourselves,
us,
really.
yeah.
We wanted to work together, and here's a little film that we made about our project.
Okay. Something about a cursor goes.
I went through old letters that you wrote me and followed your words to the bottom of the page to find all the things that you tried to show me months ago at the bottom of the page. All the words that I once knew, oh, I gave to you, yes, I gave to you. And all of the words that I want to know have dried up in the back of my throat. I set sail across your words, hoping never to find shore, never to find shore. And in the ocean of ink, I started to sink before your words filled my lungs with breath again. The yellows and pinks tell my heart to think and my mind to feel this love that is real, and to let my lips say at last everything you mean. So I whisper slow 3 words you already know, and the marching band falls in line, and the symphony leads your lips to mine.
Okay, that's the whole alphabet. So what started when we did the ABCs in the movie, you might have noticed it's sort of two-tone, like A, B, C. We thought we'd be a little bit classic with it, and then by the time we got to, I think, H, I was like, no, we're going nuts. Yeah, 56 colours later.
We just wanted it to be an explosion of colours and lettering.
And with this particular project, we worked with the Australian Literacy and Numeracy Foundation to raise a bunch of money, and everything that we sell out of this project, we donate a little bit. And we've actually managed to raise almost $3,000, which we donate a little bit every month of the sales that we make. So I'm pretty happy about that. It helps Indigenous literacy programs in a lot of remote areas. So yeah. Well, now it's my turn. Okay. So yeah, I'm the girl on the printing press in that movie, and this is a recent photo of me. My nickname around the studio is Lady MacGyver, because I work with redundant machinery for a living, so I kind of have to find unique ways of fixing things, and usually just with whatever's lying around. I have to just solve those problems with the barest materials. I'm kind of a connoisseur of tape, masking tape, electrical tape, gaffer tape. I love gaffer tape. If I got married again, gaffer would be my best man. But the great thing about working with the machines that I work with is I'm not a machinery person by any stretch of the imagination. I started out as a copywriter. I was an English major. And I love how beautifully and inherently logical these machines are. They are made up of this beautiful sustainable design. A piston on a printing press is the same as a piston on a steam engine. So once you kind of get an idea of how something goes and how something moves, you can start to apply that process throughout your work. One of my favourite questions that I'm asked in classes that I do, or little things like this, so I'm going to save you the trouble if anybody wants to ask me this at the end, you don't have to. Who services your machines? And I think it's a really interesting question because it says a lot about how we are as 21st century people. We don't really engage with our machines and our technology because all of the inner workings are going on usually behind an LCD screen or something that we can't quite connect with. But when you're working with machinery, it's actually right there, right in front of you. The parts are moving, they're turning, one part's going to another part, and if you just follow the problem back, you can find what's gone wrong. So I answer that question, I service my own motherfucking machines. So now that I've broken the profanities barrier and proven how badass I am, this is me when I'm not wrangling machines. I wrangled 2 little red-headed children who are probably wreaking havoc right now at home. And this is me for real in Little Gold Studios on one of my printing presses. I started out on a tiny little press like this guy. Well, this guy specifically, that's just an illustration of this guy, but the Adana 8x5. It's a desktop printing press, and it would have been in the back room of a church or in an office or in a school. They were used to print flyers and theatre programs and newsletters and that kind of thing. They're really beautiful little machines, and I learnt everything I know on this machine. I moved up to a floor-standing letterpress printer, not this one, this is just a much higher resolution version of mine. They come in either treadle operated, where you're physically pumping the press with your foot, or motorised, so this one's got a motor on the back of it, all the way up to the big fella, the Heidelberg, which is a fully automatic printing press. The printing process doesn't necessarily have anything to do with type and typography, as it probably sounds like, but letterpress actually kind of invented type. What you might be used to looking at when you're thinking about a font is probably this. That's a typeface to you guys, maybe. A typeface is the family of fonts, so Helvetica is the typeface, and then within that typeface you've got the fonts that might come with it. So Helvetica, Helvetica Oblique, Helvetica Bold, Helvetica Bold Oblique. But with letterpress, it looks a little bit more like this. So before fonts were fonts as we know them, they were fonts, tiny little pieces of metal type that every individual letter was its own standalone piece of lead, typeset by hand. When you think of typesetting, you probably think of working with Illustrator or InDesign, nudging the size up and down, nudging the leading out, the tracking, the kerning, all done with very precise hotkeys that I'm sure you're masterful at. But with letterpress, each line is laid out on a composing stick with the spaces laid out in between with tiny little pieces of lead, backwards as well. So this is a mirrored version, you can actually see what's written. So you can understand why typography and typesetting was an 8-year apprenticeship back in the day. The measure of how you can work with letterpress is a measure called type high. So a tiny little piece of lead is set to type high, and that's a universal measurement. So every font created by every foundry was always created to this exact same height, and that was so that you could mix fonts together. It was just kind of an agreement that everyone came up with, that we're going to be able to use these fonts together, then they're all going to have to be the same height. And the beauty of that is that we can now create things digitally. As long as they're set to type high, it doesn't really matter. You could have a block of wood underneath it and you could lay something else on top of it. As long as it sits within type high, you can letterpress it. Letterpress also brought us some really lovely, weird sayings that we still use today, like each of these little letters are called a sort, so all the A's are a sort, all the B's are a sort. If you're out of sorts, then you can't really do anything. If you're out of A's, you can't make a design. So out of sorts is actually an old typography term. The same goes for leading. If you're talking about leading, it's literal pieces of lead between the lines. And my favourite one is mind your P's and Q's, because you were typesetting backwards, and a lowercase p and a lowercase q look the same when they're backwards. When you think of how much space a typeface takes up, you probably think about it in kilobytes. But this is what type takes up in reality. Typefaces weren't files, they were filing cabinets, entire rooms full of this type in drawers. And in particular, this I think really sums it up, because this is not even type, this is leading, this is space. This is an entire room dedicated to the space between the type. That's an algorithm now, like that's built into your computer. And the kerning, I mean, is built into the font, but yeah, that was an entire room dedicated just to the space between the letters. So it's pretty easy to see how it was made redundant, all that real estate, doing a job a computer can do that you can nudge using hotkeys. And letterpress was quite sadly superseded by offset and digital, and finally the internet, essentially. Because letterpress was, at one time, the internet of 1439, when it was distributing information to places like it had never been distributed before, when you could make 1,000 copies of something without having to write it 1,000 times. That was really exciting. But not anymore. It became this thing that we can learn on a screen and we can distribute so much quicker. And this doomsday message started sort of permeating out into the design communities that print is dead. But it didn't die, because this lady, she said, no, guys, it's Martha Stewart, if you don't know who that is. All the letterpress awesomeness you probably drool over, it's business cards and cool stuff, came about because Martha Stewart in the late 1990s decided that wedding invitations would look really nice if they were finely printed instead of printed just using digital presses. And because America listens to everything Martha Stewart says, America started doing that, and that became a trend. And because Australia listens to everything America says, it eventually filtered to Australia, and this little letterpress revolution began. Pragmatic print for the distribution of information is on a funny little dying path, but printing for the process of connecting with another person, with actually doing something that's supposed to have meaning, like a wedding invitation or like a business card, has really strangely leapfrogged those two printing processes that superseded it, and has become its own thing in its own right, and it's come back with a vengeance. And I love it. I really love it. It's what I do. So what I now get to work with is digital letterpress, which is working with digital art. Sometimes it's hand-drawn, sometimes it's typeset within Illustrator or InDesign, and it's turned into plastic photopolymer plates set onto a metal base. So what I was saying about type high before, this thin plastic plate set onto a metal base is just set to type high, and I can make beautiful stuff with that. And you can see up close the kind of detail that you can achieve. Business cards are a really popular one, because they're again making a connection with a client or making a connection with a person. Say, remember me. That's what they're for, after all. And if anyone tells you they don't do wedding invitations and they're a letterpress printer, they're lying. This is a piece that I actually designed. I don't design very often, but I wanted to create something with digital type, all new digital type that kind of echoed the way that type used to be used in letterpress. And these are pages from some books that I have at home that were originally letterpress printed. So yeah, there's some little passages there. And now I get to work all the time with designers and illustrators and people just like Carla. So I don't really have to do the design anymore. I can just get inky and greasy. And I love it.
And she wears her husband's business shirts to work every day.
Every day.
And that is covered in
every
ink.
damn day. So that's me.
Cool.
Anna.
So you can see that letterpress is exquisite and beautiful, and I'm so excited to work with Amy every day and see my lettering come into this beautiful tactile thing. And when it comes off the press, you just want to touch it, and it's quite amazing. So I'm the lettering lady, and if I was a font, I'd probably be this cat. But a brief timeline of how I got into lettering. I studied graphic design in Wagga, and then I moved to Sydney and worked for some graphic design agencies and got some really great experience in the agency world. And it was fantastic, but at the end of the day, felt like I was on the computer a lot, and I wasn't using my hands, and I just felt a little bit like there was something missing. So that's when I decided to move to Berlin. And yes, I had my Bowie years. I'd like to think I was like David Bowie, you know, doing drugs and all that. But no, it was a little more clean than that. It was a bit of a type nerd journey. And I went to a workshop, a lettering workshop. And let me tell you, that workshop changed everything, because it was with Ken Barber from House Industries. And it was amazing, because I picked up a pencil and I was drawing letters, and I'd been on the computer so long, and I think I was already into typography and drawing, and it was just the perfect combination of these two things coming together. So then I started a blog called Deutsch Doodles, and I started illustrating funny German words for practice, and that kind of ignited my love of lettering even more, and I was just looking at all the cool signage around Berlin and Europe, and I was completely hooked. But then it was time to come back to Australia, and we decided to move to Melbourne, and I'm so glad that I did, because I met this lady, and now I'm in Little Gold Studios, and I'm doing lettering full time, and it's awesome. It makes me very happy. So this is my first piece of lettering. I was drawing the word gestalten, which means creative, and that's Ken Barber showing me how to draw lettering. And so I just wanted to talk to you about the different types. I mean, getting a little bit semantic here, because someone come up to me and they say, so what do you do? And I'm like, do you like make fonts? And I'm like, well, I don't know, it's a bit hard to explain. But if you really want to know, the written letter is calligraphy, and it's done in one pass of the pen. So I did that with a brush. So it was one movement. And the typographic letter, just like Amy was talking about, is meant to be replicated perfectly every single time. So you're going to lay out Arial, and it's going to look exactly the same no matter what. And then the drawn letter, which is technically lettering, is a few passes of the pencil. So I drew that letter, and it took, I was colouring in, basically. So here's a logo that I did, and it shows the process going through all the different passes of drawing that logo. And it's funny that it sort of takes a long time, and I'm trying to emulate it looking like a calligraphic brush script, but I'm drawing it. So I want it to look unique for how those letters come together, and what's going to happen with the bottom of the G and the B looping into the A. So it's funny now, my work sort of moved beyond lettering it because of this lady that I met. This is Barbara, and I met her a few years ago, and turns out she was a show card and ticket writer, and her job was to be a letterer, and she painted signs all day for 40 years. How cool is that? It's not really a job anymore, which is a little bit sad, but I met her and we bonded over being left-handed. Yes, I'm left-handed, and you can do it too. Any lefties out there? Yeah, it's actually quite an advantage because we're going that way. So when I met her, I was like, can you please teach me the ways of brush lettering? Because at that time I was just going to the art shop and picking up whatever pen I could find and just having a crack at it. And she's basically my inspiration and mentor, and I'm just so happy that I met her. And just to watch her in action, the way she has control of the brush is quite mesmerising and really beautiful. When we do workshops now and people just want to stand and watch Barbara paint all day, it's amazing. So you can see there, we're using paint and a sable hair brush, and you basically have really awesome control over that. You get the flow of the water and paint correct, and you can get those thick strokes on the down and then thin on the up. So it's so beautiful. Do you think that's beautiful? And I just find it more freeing than drawing lettering. It's quite therapeutic just to sit there and paint. I just love it. Who likes Cats and Taylor Swift? Go on, admit it. So as you can see, when I create a piece, I like to just mark it out in rough pencil first and then just go for it with the paintbrush. And it's quite freeing, and I just, keep going until I'm happy with it. And I want the final piece to be pretty much how I want it to be printed. I don't like to mess with it too much because I like to see all the brushy little bits that come through. And here it is in all its letterpress glory. So this is a split fountain printing technique where we can get that gradient happening. Do you want to talk about that briefly?
Get out from in front of the thing before I talk about it. So split fountain gradient printing done on a letterpress printer, which is a mono printer, so you can only print one colour at a time. But on this particular printing press has an ink barrel that is rounded, so I can put one colour on one side of the press, another colour on the other side, and it creates a really beautiful natural gradient in the middle. So we went from a really hot pink to, it looks a little different on here, but it's like a lilac. Yep. Over and out.
I actually brought a lot of our letterpress pieces and my process paintings, which are over on that table over there, because I thought you guys might get a kick out of seeing how it all works. So just to get a little bit nerdy, if you were interested in knowing how I get it into the computer, I actually love that my work starts by hand, goes into the computer, and then it goes back by hand to Amy to print it. I just love that process and seeing it come to life in print. So just quickly, I scan it in and into Photoshop and just clean it up, any daggy bits. And then I take it into CS5 to vectorize it because it's an older model and I just find it's heaps better. I find the new one just simplifies it way too much. So there's a shit ton of vector points there, but I think that's okay. And we turn that into the letterpress plate and you can get all that gorgeous detail in the brushy bits. And sometimes I don't need to vectorize the lettering, so I just leave it in Photoshop and I can colour it in there however I want and keep all that beautiful texture. Just quickly on the process of the alphabet that we did. I suppose what my brush lettering is basically calligraphy, but this is closer to lettering and illustration, so I'm drawing the letters. So I start by just drawing quick thumbnail pencil sketches to get the composition and the idea down. And then once I'm happy with that super tight pencil sketch, I trace over it with just a black pen to get a nice solid line and then scan that in and then vectorize it, and I can just go nuts with colour and just get the details onto one layer and then the solid colour onto the other layer so that we can separate the plates. And I just love the letterpress. Oh my God. You can see all that cool detail comes up and go over there and touch it, seriously. Just touch it. Not in a creepy way though. And this is overprint, so you get the pink and the blue to create the third colour purple, which is pretty rad. And I just thought I'd tell you a few of my favourite tools in case you want to go and have a dabble yourself. I think it's just, it's up to you to just go to the art shop and, I love hanging out in the art shop, who doesn't? Just go to the art shop and grab a few brush pens and play around. A Sharpie, just go nuts. The Uniball pen, you just get that at the news agency and you can get that's how I drew those alphabet. So I just drew fine lines and scanned that in. The Palomino pencils are really nice for drawing, and glitter pens, why the hell not? And those sable lettering brushes are actually getting harder to come by because ticket writing's not a job anymore, so they're not really in the art shop. I had to sort of dig those out of the archives. And a few tips for you. Look at lots of reference. It's all around you all the time. I just love looking at signage. I take lots of photos and refer to them all the time because I'm really into that old school sign painter styles. Practice, and practice some more. This is my practice book of brush lettering, and it just shows the amount of work that goes into practicing your strokes. I have books and books of these. So I'm working on my script font and script styles and casual script using a pointed brush and a chisel brush. Experiment with all different media and techniques to develop your own personal style, and that's what my aim is, to keep pushing myself to get my style happening with my work. And I like to use calligraphy nibs, ink, chalk, all sorts of different pens, just play around and have fun with it. And this is kind of like my little mantra that I return to a lot. It's wabi-sabi. It's a Japanese saying, because I've travelled to Japan a few times and it's my happy place. And it means there's no real English translation, but the closest is perfectly imperfect. And I think that's what I really like to embrace in my work is that kind of imperfection in the brush. And, if I wanted to use a typeface and I wanted it to be perfect, then I would, but I don't want to. So, this is my little mantra. And shameless plug for workshops that I do with Barbara. So we have one coming up on the 29th of August, and it's a 2-day thing because we feel like if you want to learn this skill, it really takes that time to go back. It's almost like being in kindergarten. You have to sort of go back to your basic strokes. But it's super fun, and there's still places left. So get a rush with the brush, I like to say. And Amy, do you want to talk about our other LOL? We like that we're called LOL because we like to lol a lot.
Do that a lot.
At cat gifts mostly.
So we've got a workshop coming up in September as well, the LOL workshop, where one day you'll spend with Carla and me, I'll be there, drawing your own drop cap, and then you'll come back the following Saturday and letterpress it. So that will be cool. That would be a good thing to do. You should do it. Come and do it.
Thanks for having us. You can find us on Instagram.
Yeah.